Lords of the Fallen is a game that I had been looking forward since its announcement and for which I had high expectations. After finishing it and investing many hours into it, in this video I'll give you the review of said title, with all the good things and the flaws that it has, reviewing all its aspects such as the story, gameplay, level design, enemies, etc. So without further ado, I am the Valley Knight, and be welcome to my definitive review of Lords of the Fallen. Starting with the gameplay, which is the most important thing, we find something very good. It has a lot of inspiration from Software games, but it has details that make it unique, and at the same time, there are things that actually enrich my experience. For example, in the combat we find two ways to dodge. You can either do a dash that is short, or if necessary, you can press the button twice. You will end up rolling and traveling in greater distance. I really like this because you have to know when to use each one. For example, I personally use the dash on normal attacks, but rolled when stuck in an area that hurts you, or in situations where you have to be more precise. You can also parry or block as your strategy if you prefer, and then by dealing damage you can regain your life. This mechanic is named Wither Damage, and as long as you block, you'll never die, and you'll be able to recover your health. When you die, you go to the Umbra world, and the longer you stay here, the more enemies you'll have, but also the more souls you'll get, so that's pretty cool. The only way to go back to Axiom is to rest at a vestige point, and you have vestige seeds, so if you have some in your inventory, you can plant it in a designated area that you choose and it will work the same as a normal campfire. The game is friendlier by giving you a second chance if you die and continuing in combat, which lowers the frustration level a bit. I have never been a fan of using magic or things like that in the other games, but on Lords of the Fallen, it is one of the best aspects of the game. They managed to design a system to throw all kind of objects, whether it's using magic, bows, crossbows, or your own hand. And the way that you do it is very intuitive. It's the first game where I legitimately enjoy using another playstyle other than melee. In addition, it is very useful because it can be used for many things such as dealing damage directly, poisoning a certain area, or even giving life and enhancing attacks and defenses of your companions. I think this has to be applauded. I truly think we should praise the developers for creating this system. It was very fun and I enjoyed it a lot. The builds you can make are varied, and there are even different types of magic that need their certain attributes to be able to use them, such as having a threshold 1 for that type of enchantment. The level design is another thing that I really liked. In particular, it differs from other Souls with the level of verticality that some areas have, and the two world mechanics. The puzzles, despite not being very challenging, I think they do a good job and they're a good addition. There are many types of areas with their respective colors and biomes: rainy cliffs, castles on top of mountains, forests full of vegetation, burning cities. I somehow felt like I was exploring locations from The Lord of the Rings, and that's a plus. You also have this journal which has drawings and guides you on where you have to go. I thought this was a really nice touch and I hadn't seen it anywhere. There are secret areas you can find, and overall the game has very well hidden secrets if you're into that sort of thing. Personally, I like it when a game does those details, but at the same time I don't like having to watch a 40-minute guide to get a weapon or to find a character. I appreciate it more when it comes naturally. But if you're a player who enjoys it, this game has very well hidden details. The truth is that the game has very good graphics, but something that is worth mentioning is that, at least in my experience, I would have liked it to be more optimized. There are specific areas where it lags and the textures won't load and stuff like that. It's not something that will completely ruin your gaming experience, but it is 100% worth mentioning. I played it on PS5 with an already advanced version of the game, and I still suffered from those details. Another thing that I loved about the game is the customization. Even though it's just aesthetic, the fact that you can find all kind of armors in the game and that you can also find dyes for them is incredible. Trust me, there were days where I just spent a ton of time just combining different outfits and changing their color until I found a combination that I liked. And they all look spectacular. If there was an award for the best looking armors in a Souls-like, this game would take the trophy without any single doubt. It's something that wasn't necessary, but they added it and they did it in the best possible way. And talking about another thing that they did very well, we have the co-op. I had the opportunity to play with randoms, and the truth is that it's very fun. In fact, I think that the game is designed to be played in that way, and it is appreciated. Having said that, I have seen that many complain about the service and that multiplayer doesn't work, But I do know that the developers are constantly improving things and updating the game, so that's good. Although technically it's something that they should have done before releasing it. But yeah, the developers are really good. They came up with the DLC and they added a bunch of stuff that wasn't there initially. When you fight against other players, the camera goes to the sky, but other than that, I didn't have many problems with it. I even wish that games like Elden Ring had a multiplayer like this, so that I could play everything in the company of a friend. You know, without the need of finding something and then having to summon that friend and so on and so on. The story was fine and that's it. It didn't surprise me, but if you really like lore and things like that, I think it's a game that does very well in that section. The story in general is very clear, with us being the chosen ones to prevent a deer from taking over the world. But if you dig a little deeper, you can find interesting aspects, even to the point of doubting whether what you're doing is the right thing or not. It has an interesting duality. You can even get 3 types of endings depending on the cause that you want to support in this world. The music in the game, as well as the story, I think it's good, but no more. The sounds are involving and make you feel like you're in a place you're playing. There are some soundtracks that are very good, but they're not very iconic because I would say that they all kinda sound alike. Except for you, Judge Cleric. You're perfect. Something that I do have to criticize the game for is the issues of the enemies. I feel that the first 7 hours of the game were very interesting in this regard because that's when you find a lot of variety. But from there on, they are repeated in all of the levels. And when I say in all of them, I mean in all and each of the areas of the game. And even if you think about the variety, there isn't that much. That is, you meet a dog, then you meet a fire throwing dog, then you meet a poison throwing dog, then an ice throwing dog, and so on. There are many enemies that have the same movements and simply have slightly different designs. In Unbroken, there are only 5 or 4 types of enemies, and that's it. There are no more. The positioning of the enemies even reaches the level of tedious. The game relies heavily on placing enemies in small places to increase the difficulty, when in reality it does not need it. It seems to me that they wanted to compensate for the poor quality of the enemies by placing them in large quantities. They also abuse too much of placing hidden enemies, to the point that it no longer surprises you because you already expect it to be around every corner. The truth is that I was very disappointed with this aspect, especially because there are enemies that are good and challenging, but there were very few, and they even use them as bosses in several occasions. And as a final section, I would like to talk a little bit about the bosses in the game. In general, I would say that there are some bosses that I really liked, and others that are straight up garbage like the freaking crow. I'm telling you, the enemies in this game are very bad and somehow they decided to throw them all in the same place and call it a boss. I didn't like the fights with the NPCs when they become a boss either. Many of the arenas are small as hell, so even with the cool moveset, the space hurts the potential. And like I said before, many of the actual enemies are also a boss at some point. But there are some that I really liked. For example, Pieta the Blessed is such a great first boss. Then we also have the Light Reaper, the Unbroken Promise, and the GOAT, Judge Cleric. Those fights are some of the best that I've seen in the genre. In conclusion, Lords of the Fallen is a good game. A Souls-like with interesting twist, and one that has some flaws. But it is worth it, and I recommend it despite having a little variety of enemies and poor handling of them. A title that has interesting mechanics that are good for this type of game and very fun, especially if you play with a friend. Seriously, I would truly encourage everyone to play this game with a friend. But hey, those are pretty much my thoughts on the game. What about you? Have you tried it? And if so, would you recommend it? Tell me your opinion down in the comments. I would really appreciate it if you gave me a thumbs up. It would really help the algorithm kick in, and you might want to consider subscribing. Thank you for watching. I am the Valley Knight, and I'll see you in the next video.